My guest today is an apothecarist and wortcunner who loves plants of all kinds, but they have a particular interest in ones that you might not want to find in your garden: weeds. In fact, they wrote an entire book on that subject called The Tameless Path. And in this interview, we're going to talk about invasive plants. Why are they so scary? What makes a weed a weed? And what magical, medicinal, or practical value might they have hidden beneath the surface? Allow me to introduce Kamden Cornell. Welcome to Music, Myth, and Magic. I'm Eric Arcadian, and today I'm speaking to author Kamden Cornell. Kamden, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me, Eric. I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, well, I am honored to have you here. And, to kick things off, I would really like to hear a little bit about your background and kind of just tell people a little bit about who you are.
Okay. So my background, like the whole thing, or just what kind of background?
As much as you want to share.
Okay, cool. So background-wise, I was raised in kind of a non-conventional household. Like, I had hermetics as part of my childhood. Like, my grandfather was an astrologer and an alchemist, and he taught classes on hermetic philosophy. My grandmother did like card reading and aura healing and like all the like more new agey stuff. And so that was constantly in the house, which I think a lot of people think that's cool. And it was cool. It was, it was also its own kind of weird as a child, but here we are. I took it and ran with it eventually as an adult. So great. And so I think that upbringing has really informed a lot of what I've done throughout the rest of my life. When it comes to like higher education, my background is actually in biological anthropology. And so I have a large background in like biology and the sciences, which has really like supported me in my other adult decision, which was to become a massage therapist. And and then from there, I started teaching biology at the school that I learned massage at. And that has just opened like a bunch of doors, oddly enough. So my first herbalism teacher I met through the massage school. She was teaching herbalism there. And we just kind of hit it off. And then I started studying underneath her. She is a local curandera in Albuquerque. Her name is Bernadette. And I trained under her for years and learned a bunch of, just like herbalism in general, along with a lot of magical stuff and folklore and how to deal with spirits. And like, it wasn't what I expected to get out of massage school, and yet it was exactly what I needed. And it really fueled like the writing of this book, because she's also the one that really turned me on to using invasives and like how to build better relationships with them, and understanding them more as the voice of the earth. Like the earth is telling you something. There's a reason this plant is here. It wouldn't be here if the earth didn't want it. So how do we listen to that, key into it, and then help the earth to be as healthy as possible while understanding the conversation she's having with us with these quote unquote invasives? And so I guess that's the trajectory of the background that leads to this book. Is a straight through a massage school with my curandera teacher.
Very interesting. So I was going to ask you, like, why weeds, why invasive plants? And I guess you kind of answered that a little bit. So let me ask you this question. What makes something a weed? What makes something an invasive species?
What makes it an invasive species? Really, it is just someone calling it that.
Hmm.
So technically, what makes an invasive species is that it is a non-native in the area that it's found, um, and that it has the potential to overtake large areas all on its own, um, and that it causes like one of the main keys to calling something invasive is that it causes a problem for either the environment or the economy. And so, really, I think the term invasive is a politically charged term that leads to the ability of larger entities, such as like agricultural companies, companies creating herbicides and things like that, to create these kind of wholesale attacks on certain plants while supporting plants of agriculture, something that's going to drive their bottom line. Because when you look at it, the plants that are called invasive really tend to be sort of problematic, not even really all that problematic, but sort of problematic for larger agricultural pursuits. Um, and they may damage the bottom line of those companies. Um, and I think there's also a lot of, uh, like, especially in the vocabulary of invasive science, like, there's an inherent racism, there's an inherent othering, there's an inherent, like, it doesn't belong. And so you key into the fear of people, you key into the hatred of people, very similar to what we're seeing politically right now in a bunch of different places. And you ramp that up through rhetoric and through propagandizing and all of that stuff. And eventually you get to this place where people hate these plants. And so I think just to go back to answering your question, I think that what makes a plant invasive is someone's decision to make it a fearful thing. Because if we look at the history of plants, like they migrate, that's what they do. There's no plant that has just remained endemic to a place. They need to move around. They're kind of part of the circulatory system of the planet in a way. Like they move in the way that they need to move. And there is a large part when it comes to invasives with human activity, where we bring these plants into new areas and then they take up, they're very opportunistic. So they take the opportunity to spread. But what we're finding now is that they aren't aggressively like destroying or murdering other plants. They are taking advantage of the opportunity that we have provided for them to spread. And then because they're spreading, it seems like they're overcrowding natives or like nothing's feeding on them or like that kind of thing. With more advanced and newer science in these areas, we're finding that they do serve purposes in the ecosystems that they have found themselves in, but it does take time. And so I think another part of the definition of an invasive is from a human perspective, which is very, very short. We don't have the same geological time, like the same concept when we're coming up with these ideas. Like it's hard for us to get there. And so now that we've been looking at these plants for decades, it's like, oh, well, now this red algae is actually cleaning toxins out of this lake and it's providing shelter for trout. And like now these trout are actually flourishing because of the red algae that's moved in. I think in my book, I write about a different kind of algae, euglena, that rode into an extremely toxic environment on the feathers of geese And then the geese died because it was an incredibly toxic environment, like cobalt and like manganese and all kinds of like crazy caustic stuff that kind of melted them. So it was a really terrible story. But it melted, and it wasn't geese; it was swans. So even sadder, even these beautiful swans just melted into mush in this weird little lake. But because of that, now that euglena is actually purifying the water, and the water itself is in a place where it may infiltrate the water table of the nearby residents, like areas where residents live, and would poison everything. And so this algae is actually being studied because it so rapidly is detoxifying the water. And then another example is tamarisk in the wetlands in California. Like most of that has all been ripped out for development. Again, human activity causing a problem. But there is the American thrush, and the American thrush is an endangered species. And that species evolved in the wetland because we ripped it out. Its native habitat was destroyed. And now we're finding that they're actually taking refuge in tamarisk, which is one of these invasive trees that everybody wants to rip out of everywhere that they find it. But without the tamarisk, those birds will die because they have adapted to living in the tamarisk. So it's just kind of like, I think I got off topic a little bit, but really what makes an invasive species is just the human decision that it is, because we don't understand the totality of the way that the earth is working, the way that the earth is speaking. And that's a problem. But I got off track, so let's recombobulate me, Eric. Where are we?
Okay. So, that story about the like toxic water it was like heavy metals leaching into the water or whatever, and then the algae came and started cleaning the water. That was fascinating. And you, in the book, in that chapter, on that page, you have a footnote about like some things about like cell evolution and cells eating other cells. And when I read that, I was just sitting there trying to imagine all of that happening and like growing in this underground cave and this weird alchemical process transforming the water table. And then I was also thinking about cell evolution. I just sat there for a minute and I was thinking like, I am just a collection of cells that have eaten other cells. I am an entire universe. It's just like, I just had this weird, like, transcendental moment of envisioning evolution and an entire universe with myself. So that was fun. But I do think the whole concept is really interesting. And, you know, like as a kid, I would go out into our yard and I loved dandelions and I thought they were so beautiful. I loved the flower. And I remember one day and I picked a bunch of them and I made like a little dandelion bouquet and I brought it to my mom to show her. I was really little. And she was like, oh, okay, well, you know, we don't really like those because those are weeds. You know, those are invasive. Those aren't good plants. So what is with this negative energy that we have that surrounds the word weed and invasive?
What is the negative energy around it? I think that, like I touched on a little bit earlier, like in the vocabulary of invasive science and how it's kind of couched in this kind of xenophobia and racism that we find in just like the American, like the United States psyche. And in the psyche of like a ton of other places as well, but because we're here. And it's really easy to other things, right? Like it's just easy to say that is something that I don't like. That's something bad. And once you've said that it's bad, then you just kind of say like, oh, well, why is it bad? There's someone out there telling you, you know, like dandelions are ugly. They're destroying the beauty of the neighborhood because they're little beautiful yellow spots in your perfectly monocultured, useless lawn. And really, I think that a lot of the negativity around invasives is couched in that xenophobia. It's just like, this is the other, it doesn't belong. It doesn't fit into my idea of this perfect dream ideal of what my home should look like, of what my wilderness should look like. And it's interesting to consider that in context of like conservation science, because conservation conservation science is important. It's done a lot of good. It also wants to return things to the way they were before humans were a problem. Well, at the same time, like kind of devastating these ecosystems in order to return them to the way that they were so that we don't have to see things like dandelions that didn't exist, I guess. Even though dandelions have been here forever. And I guess that actually keys me into another point there, is like, dandelions have been here for like a very long time. They're not new. But then why do we call them a weed? Because we don't want them there. It's just something that we find ugly. It's unwanted. It doesn't fit in. Why are they suddenly called invasive? Because that makes it easier to get people on board with eradicating them. It makes it easier to sell your Roundup. It makes it easier to control the narrative around agriculture. And I think that's the real power in that word invasive. And then why is that? Because the word invasive also implies otherness, scariness, danger, because of the way that our culture and various other cultures have really cocooned inside this xenophobic philosophy. And so I don't know. I think it's a very deep and complicated issue it's very personal for people. Like, I just got into an online fight with someone about invasives. And they were just like very adamant. Like, all the experts I've ever talked to say that total eradication is the only option. We have to eradicate these things, get rid of them. They don't belong. And it's like, but okay. That is a very hardcore stance, in my opinion. Like, going out into these ecosystems where they're just trying to reach balance, but we can't stop ourselves. We just want to go in there and cause a ruckus because it's what humans do. But then I think, like, what else do we apply that languaging to? And like, I think of queer communities and trans communities, and like the way that like pro-Israeli media is talking about Palestine and like things like that. Like, why are you saying that this large group of beings needs to be eradicated? Like, it's gross. And maybe, like, since it's gross, like, maybe we should stop and think about it before we just go out and rip entire groves of elms out of a place, disturbing the soil, so then the soil becomes barren, and then we don't replace it with anything. Or we seed native seeds trying to get those to grow, but now because of climate shift, like, they can't. It's too hot, or it's too dry, or it's too wet. So who's going to take over in those areas? Like, we're not really thinking forward, we're thinking backward. And I think, like, the entire globe is kind of in this pendulum swing where we're going back. We're thinking backward. And eventually we'll be thinking forward again, but it'll take time. But I think that it will take time and then thinking about things like this, like why is the dandelion bad? we should that should be a rumination for us and a long-term one. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And it brought up more questions too. So, first of all, this is something I, for some reason, didn't really consider before when using this terminology. Is there a difference between weed and invasive? Or is invasive just a new word that we have come up with to refer to weeds because it's scarier?
I think so. They are a little different. Like you can be a weed without being an invasive, but then it also kind of depends on where that weed is. So, um, in certain areas, like one plant is going to be considered a noxious weed or an invasive, while in another area it's not because it's not as much of a problem for agriculture. It just happens to be a weed where you don't want it. And people are going to weed it out of their gardens and they're going to take it out of their lawns, but it's not necessarily such a big, scary problem. So I think they are different, but only really because, like you said, the invasive is just scarier. It's like an escalation of weed. Like we need to escalate the fear about this one plant. And it's like, why are we scared of plants? They're just plants. They're hanging out in the corn and they're just enjoying themselves. Like, why is that a problem?
I think one of the interesting things is that it's not the plant's fault that it's there in so many instances. Like we have chosen to cultivate or rehome particular species of plants. Like I read this one study, I think it was about the Bradford pear years ago. And so basically, like people thought it was a pretty tree. So they planted it in all these residential neighborhoods. And then it started spreading and they didn't want it to spread anymore. And now they're like, no, it's invasive. Don't plant it anymore. But it's our fault that we brought it there. It's not the fault of the plants. Like the plant did not have any ill will to come and like mess up people's environments. And I guess on a different level, these plants do serve a purpose when they're in their natural environment. So, like within nature, you talk about some of these quote, quote, invasive species, like recouping nutrients in the soil or like reestablishing the soil so that the regular plants that we want to grow there are able to grow. But this process takes like hundreds of years. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So when I talk about that in the book, I'm talking about like certain plants being what are called first stage successional plants. And a first stage successional plant does exactly what invasives do. They invade an area that's already barren or disturbed. The soil is already not great. And when you see a plant like that, you know that the soil isn't great. Like that's one of the things it's trying to say. So like you go to an area and it's just covered in dandelion or like sunflower that you don't want there, or even something like garlic mustard. You go into these areas and there's a bunch of it. That isn't necessarily a bad thing because what it's saying to you is the soil is depleted. I am really one of the only things that can grow here. And why is the soil depleted? Because of human activity. Like y'all messed it up. Y'all ripped something out of here, or you put a highway too close, and now everything is just disturbed. So I am here to fix the soil by increasing nitrogen, by bringing water up. And they do tend to modify the soil to um, like to support themselves, right? But we do the same thing. Like we're doing the same thing. We change nature to support ourselves. So it just kind of bothers me. Anyway, but they are changing the soil. However, as they're doing that, they're also bringing up new minerals. They're bringing up vitamins. They are providing sub-terrestrial environments for various bugs and nematodes and things like that that are helping the soil to do its job, to become healthier. They're creating a healthy microbiome for the soil. As they die, they're providing nitrogen. Some of them are diverting water back into the soil. Like they're also increasing the like the overall potency, the overall fertility of it, so that it then can later support what are called second stage successional plants, which are larger things like bushes and shrubs and like some of the things that we kind of want to be seeing more of, depending on the plant. And then eventually you get to the third stage of succession, which is like an established forest. So they're just the very, very first part of the soil getting healthier and building what will later be a thriving ecosystem. But because we've already made the shift for the land, it's going to take a very long time to reach that place. And it's like part of the reason that we don't really see that is that we continuously interfere. So we're continuously adding pollution. We're continuously depleting water. We're continuously creating these like micro vibrations next to highways that are causing further and further disturbed soils. And so they can't actually complete the job. And so we just see these like for years and years and years, like invasives growing in number and like taking the opportunity to spread and never really reaching a balance in those ecosystems because we are an unbalancing problem. And I touch on that in my book too quite a bit, I think. Just the idea that, like, I think it's on the Forest Servicery website. Invasive species are like the number one cause for ecological degradation, leading to like forest fires and stuff. And that just boggles my mind because it's not, like you said, it's not their fault. Like, why are they the number one thing instead of us being the number one thing? We should be the number one thing on the list. But I think that we have a really hard time just claiming responsibility for our part of the problem. And even when we do claim responsibility, it's kind of a roundabout way of doing it. And we're just kind of like, sure, it's us, but now it's like this thing is like out of control. And we're always kind of shifting the blame. There was a philosopher who I'm very fond of called René Girard. And René Girard wrote about like scapegoating and how easy it is and how human beings have a really, really hard time claiming responsibility for anything because we're actually just so much better at scapegoating. And so like it's really hard to get to the core of an issue and really solve problems. And I guess that's my answer to that.
Yeah, so that's their contribution and kind of their place on an ecological level. You talked about, reorienting the soil and stuff like that. But on a spiritual or an energetic level, what are they doing for us? There was one line in the book. It was right in the beginning, and it was a quote from someone, I believe, that told you that the medicine we need can be found near us or is going to grow near us.
That's actually a quote from my teacher. So that's from Bernadette. And that was how she keyed me into these invasives. She said the medicine that you need will be growing by your front door. And that actually started me on this whole journey, because when we first started learning together, um, I took that to heart, and I was just like, well, what is growing like right there? And I opened the door, um, and what was there was London Rocket, which is a kind of mustard. It's an invasive mustard. Uh, and at the time, like I've told this story a few times now, but at the time I was dealing with anorexia. So like I was in the midst of it. Um, and I was wanting to like shift my perspective around food, and I was having a hard time finding anyone to talk to. And um, it was a difficult time. um, but what I was also experiencing, because I wasn't eating for like 3 or 4 days at a time, was like my digestion was really screwed. Like my metabolism was also screwed. Everything was kind of screwed. Um, but I couldn't get over it. Like I just couldn't get myself to eat anything. And so I started working with the garlic and just like taking that in. Like I would eat the garlic. Um, and sometimes that would be all I ate in a day. It was just like a garlic plant. Um, but really trying to key into it. And I do really feel like it helped with my digestion. Like it helped my stomach kind of kickstart again. It helped me develop a better appetite. Like I actually started wanting food, and food wasn't disgusting to me anymore. And it also, in a way, helped me with my confidence. Like I didn't feel like I looked like a monster. Like, and it was all in working with this garlic, and also working with Bernadette, and working in the school, and like a lot of things kind of fell into place. But I do feel very strongly that it was garlic, or not garlic. I keep saying garlic, mustard, this London Rocket mustard, that really kind of guided the way that events unfolded for me. And it was kind of the key in the door. And it was just this very gentle spirit that was like, eat, eat this, take me into your body, and let me warm you from inside. Like, let me be the fire that you need to get through what you're dealing with. And so it's still one of my favorite plants. I love London Rocket. I just let it grow in my garden. My husband doesn't like that, but because it does kind of overtake everything. But we pull it out as we need to. And I think that that's just to go off topic a little bit again, like that's part of it. Is it's not necessarily eradication, but management. So like they grow in our garden, they kind of overtake things, but then we pick them and we eat them. We pick them and we make medicine with them. So they're never out of control, because it's just we're managing them. But to return to your question, like how are they helping you spiritually? I think if you have a practice where you talk to plants anyway, like talk to the invasives. And like I've talked to a lot of people who have like an herbal practice or a wort cunning practice, and they have a spiritual relationship with plants, but they've never started one with an invasive. It's just like, well, sit with them, talk to them. Bindweed is so pretty. I think I think bindweed is a really easy one to start with because she's gorgeous. And it's just fun to sit next to these little pink morning glories that are just growing out of the crack in the sidewalk. Or I also think it's really easy to start with something like a mustard because they taste good. They are pretty. You can see pollinators on them. You can see bugs working like around the plants. And so you can really start to see how they are in some ways supporting this little ecosystem on the sidewalk. And I think that's really cool.
So I love everything you said. There's a lot to unpack there, and I appreciate you sharing that personal story about yourself as well. And I do really like the concept of thinking that something that I need on an energetic level is going to be found out in nature growing nearby. But I would like to learn more about what might be growing nearby. And so for someone like me, I'm really, really bad at identifying what a particular plant is unless it's like a really, really obvious flower or something like that. So if I'm going to go outside and go in my backyard and kind of try to see what's in the grass and stuff, like what is the best resource for me to try to identify or understand some things that might be growing there?
So I think your best resource is a local person who knows. Um, so like there are a lot of herbalists. Like in my community, I teach people about plant ID and like how to go out and find stuff. And I do urban walks where I take people around different neighborhoods and like just show them what's growing there. Um, and I'm pretty sure that in most cities now, there's probably someone sort of like that. Um, you could also talk to like whatever university is nearby. You could see if they have like a botany program, like where you like even if it's just like a summer program where you go and like out and learn about those things. Um, on an easier pocket candy level, iNaturalist has actually gotten really good. So it is an algorithm. At first, it was kind of like they were making the wrong, like identifying things wrong quite a bit. But iNaturalist has gotten a lot better. And so that's a good one. PlantNet is another app that you can use that's actually pretty good. If you're using any of those apps, I think it's important to get the ID and then go like look that up on the internet or in a book, and just make sure that it's the right identification. If you rely too heavily on the app, sometimes you think wild things. Like one of the apps told my little brother that a vitex tree was a butterfly bush. I was like, well, that was wrong. But your picture did kind of look butterfly bushy, so I can see where it got confused. So I think it's important to double check, get the initial thing, double check, and then ask an expert if you can.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
And I know a lot of herbalists in a lot of cities who are really interested in like getting people keyed into what's growing just around them.
I like that. Okay. I'm going to have to find somebody local that can actually point things out to me and tell me this is what that is, because I have used those apps before and I've tried to like take pictures and have them identify, and depending on which side of the tree I'm standing on, it'll tell me like it's two different things, and I always feel super wary about trying to be certain of something that way. So finding a person, I think that is a really good idea. In terms of managing weeds or invasives, you touched on this a moment ago, saying that occasionally you let them grow in your garden, and when you need to, you pluck them. But on an industrial scale, we are not so forgiving. So one of the things that we're doing is trying to make, and I didn't really know this until I read it in your book, but we're making Roundup resistant seeds and growing those crops so that we can just spray everything with herbicide to knock everything that's not those plants out. And it's not supposed to necessarily be toxic, but maybe it's carcinogenic. So like first of all, what is the danger of these herbicides being used so broadly?
What is the danger? It depends on who you talk to. So there is a lot of science that says that it's not that big a deal, but there's a lot of other science that says that it is a big deal. And so you kind of have to see who's saying it. And often the science that says that it's not a big deal is somehow tied to the agricultural industry. Like it may not be directly paid for by Roundup or like any of the other big herbicide companies, but they're somehow linked to agriculture, like philosophically or monetarily. Like they're keyed into that. And not necessarily into a more gentle, nuanced earth science, like that takes into account the fact that we don't actually really know what herbicide does in the soil. We don't know really how deep it goes. We don't know how well it gets into water tables. Like there are some studies about that. But they're always a little, like they're not conclusive. It just says there's probably not a problem, but we'll have to do more studies later. Like, but then other studies have shown like dogs who have been exposed to glyphosate and experiencing then like various forms of cancer or like going blind, like things like that. People who have been exposed to larger levels of it. And like when a study says that an herbicide isn't really a problem, they are talking about small percentages of it. Like if it's this amount in your diet that you're getting, like that's not really a big deal. However, there isn't really a way of measuring every single little bit of the crop that you're harvesting. And when we're just broadcasting it using airplanes or using, oh gosh, now I can't remember the name of those things, but there's like an overhead irrigation mechanism that some people use to broadcast these herbicides. Like you don't know if some plants are getting more or if certain kinds of soil within the field are harboring more of it and it's getting taken up into the plant. Like we don't know. So it's, I think it's too new of a thing for us to be making such certain statements. But I think that we should err on the side of caution because herbicides were developed as a form of chemical warfare. So like they were meant to make people sick. They were meant to destroy food crops. Like it is glyphosate. Glyphosate itself was developed as a metal chelator, like to clean steel. And then they just noticed like, oh, it also kills grass. We should make money off of that. And so, and so it was developed into this broad spectrum, broadleaf killing thing. And then you brought up the Roundup resistant seeds, the Roundup Ready stuff. That genome is patented by Monsanto. So they own the genome for that. And like they have actually sued farmers, like small scale farmers whose crops have shown the properties of the Roundup Ready crops, because now their crops are crossbred with this genome that they own the patent to. And so it's like it's this really weird manipulation of nature that just makes, like it all leads back to money. Like how are they going to make the most money? How are they going to knock out the competition? How are they going to become like the biggest dog on the block? And it's all very manipulative and dark. But I think that when it comes to herbicides, we should always remember that they did start as a form of chemical warfare. They are poison. And that within herbalism, especially in magical communities right now, we talk about how blessing and bane bleed from the same vein. And like the dose makes the poison. And if you can't be sure of the dose, then like you don't know if it's poison or not.
That, it is terrifying that our herbicides came out of things that were meant for warfare. It's terrifying. And then also, it just blows my mind. How can you copyright a plant? I know I know we want to copyright everything in the universe, but like how, honestly, how can you copyright something that is out there and is going to be interbreeding with other species and leaving little parts of itself? And then I don't know, that blows my mind. So the herbicide route is a little terrifying. Are there natural methods that don't involve these chemicals that we can use to try to manage these types of plants?
There are, but not on the scale that like US agriculture is at. So like the amount of harvest that needs to be taken, not even to feed people, because we know that we have the ability to feed and yet do not because it's not profitable. So it's not even that we need to grow this much to feed people. We need that much to feed livestock. Like a huge percentage of agricultural product goes to feeding livestock, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. Just like the farming practices in this country are just absolutely bonkers. But also like farms are subsidized by the amount that they produce. And so like if they're producing more, they're getting more. They're getting more profit. And it doesn't matter if it's going anywhere. There also like there are subsidies and partnerships between very large agricultural pursuits and herbicide companies. Like they create an environment for each other to make billions of dollars a year. At the same time as, depleting our soils, very highly potentially poisoning our soils, creating issues with methane gases because of the ways that we farm livestock, as well as creating an environment for more antibiotic resistant bacteria because of the way that we treat animals, like that we then eat. And like it's just freaking madness. And like it's not like a lot of people turn and they're like, meat's killing the planet, the meat industry's killing the planet, and in some ways it is because of the way that we farm them. But it's also soy crops and corn crops and things like that we are taking out acres and acres and acres and acres of land to grow these monocropped things because that's what we say is okay. And like, how the hell is soybean not invasive? Like, it's non-native. It takes over enormous swaths of land because we put it there. But it's one of our agricultural crops. And so even though it's devastating ecosystems, it is like highly problematic for soils where it's at because of the number, like the amount that's being produced. Like, we don't call that invasive because it's making billions of dollars for the agricultural industry. So, and that's like, just to go back to the first points that we've made, like that's why it's important to consider, why is this thing invasive? Like, who says that? And like, why do I hate it so much? I feel like if we're feeling like this hate in ourselves toward a being, we should really think why. Because that feels like some sort of outside force has controlled my narrative to such a point that now I hate that thing and I want it gone. And that's a really big problem that I think each individual person should ruminate on.
So you have painted quite a picture here of these issues and these problems. And, I got to be honest, when I think of them on a global scale, they seem pretty insurmountable for me, just as one person. So, in your opinion, is there anything we can do as individuals or even collectively as spiritual practitioners? Is there anything we can do to help tilt the tables back towards the positive?
I think so, absolutely. The way to tilt anything back toward the positive, in my opinion, is lean into your community. Like learn your community. Wherever you're at, and it can be really hard, especially if you're in a major city. But somehow contact like a local farmer somewhere close to you. Know a farmer. Know 5 to 10 farmers. I know a lot of farmers, and I think like that has really helped with my like my feelings of despondency when I think about this stuff. Because I know that there are people out there actually helping the soil. And like everyone that I've talked to, like all the farmers I know that are like actively out there doing this work, like they're fertilizing soil in natural ways, like they're providing just vegetal biomass. They are composting their own stuff. They are like doing what they can to work with the natural process of soil evolution. Like they're doing such cool stuff. When I talk to them and then we talk about invasives, they don't hate them. They're like, no, I actually really appreciate that this plant, like we do manage it. We tear it out where it needs to be torn out. But it is like the bindweed is helping with erosion. Johnson grass, I like a lot of my friends hate Johnson grass, but they're like, we let it grow some places because it helps like with moisture. It really does. And we make sure like it's a difficult job, but we make sure that we're doing our best to keep it under control. They love, like almost everyone that I talk to loves plantain, even though it's considered invasive in larger circles, like because it really does help the soil. And it's a tasty plant, and it's used medicinally, and it's great. So I think that the first thing you should do, lean into community, find a farmer or several to get to know. Find someone in your community that knows plants well, as either an herbalist or a botanist or something like that. I also think that as spiritual and magical practitioners, just getting in on the conversation with plants. Like, bring all of these little guys into your wheelhouse somehow. And remember that no plant is your enemy. No matter what other people are saying, no plant is your enemy. They are emissaries of the heart of the earth. Like, they are here to speak with us. They are here to enjoy their own little life and do their thing. Like they just like we take joy in simply existing sometimes. Plants also take joy in simply existing. And like to say that's a bad thing, we need to eradicate it completely, is really, really tough. So I think that's my answer. Talk to the plants, talk to the people that like plants, and get to know that community.
Okay, that's some pretty actionable things. Go out, make some farmer friends, talk to the people who know the plants around you, and talk to the plants themselves. So, an interesting thing I was wondering about as you have been talking about all of this and spirituality in the plants and even in the invasive species. We tie a lot of gods and goddesses, various cultures, to agriculture. And we might have gods or goddesses of plants. But do you think there is like a patron deity of weeds or of invasive species particularly? Do they have that much of a different energy?
Yes. For me, that is Akate. Like, and I mean, Akate is kind of like the goddess that I work with the most, and so I always say like, "Oh, it's Akate." But like Ekate being a goddess of crossroads, being a goddess of liminal places, being a goddess of the disenfranchised, being a goddess of, like, because she's a goddess of the crossroads, she's also kind of a goddess of the bad boys, like a goddess of the people who are misunderstood by the community and kind of tossed out by and large. Like, for me, she is a goddess of wayside things. And so I really turn to her as kind of a guide and guard in that realm. As well, like, she's also the goddess that informs the pharmakeis, right? Like, she's the Medea learned under her, Kirke learned under her. So who better to turn to learn the medicinal and magical properties of plants across the board, including these invasives, and whose heart can harbor that sense of lost place. Also, Hecate is an immigrant. Like, she began existence in Anatolia, Caria, and then immigrated to Greece. So we think of her as like this Greek goddess, but she started over where Turkey is now. And so, like, she also understands this movement, this migration, and how things grow and change in that process. So I would say Hecate is probably my number one answer to that question. And then also I think Dionysos. Like, I'm a Hellenic polytheist, so like all of my I'm probably more in the Greek Hellenistic realm. But Dionysos, I think, also makes a good one because Dionysos is also known as Zoe, and Zoe is like this eternal life. So it is this eternal process that I think these invasives as first stage successionals take part in. Like, they're a part of this eternal cycle of rebuilding and revivifying, and the way that life is constantly at play with itself. And so I think either of those might be fun to work with on this journey. Yeah, I think those are my two. Those are my two suggestions.
No, that totally makes sense. And you know, I remember reading that you also see Hecate pretty interwoven in the landscape of alchemy. And I'm not even going to open that door right now because I feel like if I open the alchemy door, we would have another 1 hour long conversation about it. So maybe that's a conversation we can have in the future. Right now, I do want to hear, because this isn't the only book that you've written. So do you want to give a short plug for your other books and tell me a little bit about them?
Yeah, sure. So my first book was called Ars Granorum, The Succeed Arts of Witchcraft, which I self-published. And that one just kind of talks about core tenets of witchcraft, or like what I thought were core tenets at that time, and still pretty much do. I still enjoy that book. You can get it through my website. My second book was one called On Needles and Pins, which was about puppetry, like using puppets and figures in magic. That one is actually being republished by Crossed Crow and will be out summer 2026 under the name On Pins and Needles, because everyone was getting confused with On Needles and Pins. So that one is getting republished. And then the book that we talked about today is The Tameless Path, Unleashing the Power of Invasive Plants and Witchcraft. That one's available through Cross Crow. It's also available at like a bunch of bookstores and stuff, so I'm sure that it's just there on a shelf somewhere for you to pick up. Yeah, those are my books.
Excellent. Okay, so just for anybody who's watching, I will have links to all of these books in the video description. So all you will have to do to find one of them is click. And in a minute here, Kamden, I am going to have to ask you the signature question. But before I do that, I would also like to open it up and hear how people can find you online and also where you will be in person coming up soon.
So you can find me online at heartandvineapothecary.com, which is a very long title. And then I'm more active on Instagram, which is at heart_n_vine_apothecary, because I just like long things in general, I suppose. But that's where you can really engage with me. And if anybody messages me on Instagram, I'm very open to answering questions and, taking critique. If you critique me too hard, I will be sassy, but I will try to take it with a good heart. And then where I will be in person next is Salem Witch Fest in Salem, Massachusetts. I will be there in person teaching a class called I Shall Eat Your Tears Away, which is about La Malinche and La Llorona and how they are, how we can reach out to those spirits for justice and turning magic. It's been a really cool process of research for those. I am very excited to share La Llorona with the East Coast. And then right after that, the next weekend, I will be at Temple Fest. And I'll be teaching another class on Malinche. And in that class, we're talking about Mars and how to turn curses and stuff using some of the turning work. And then I'll be teaching a second class there on Ecate Brimo, who is the castigating goddess, the strong one, and the goddess that I use for cursing and hex stuff. So they're going to be very exciting, and it's going to be a very, very long 2 weeks, but I'm excited to be there.
That is exciting. That's a good spread of different places that you'll be. Those are all really cool festivals. So just like the book links, I will take all the social media links and I will take all the festival links. I will put those in the video description below. So again, all you've got to do is click. Okay, Kamden, it is time for the signature question. So how do you use sound or music in your personal magical practice?
Okay. That has recently developed. I think that sound is really important in magic. I use singing bowls and stuff like that, but not in the way that they're used in new agey stuff. I use them more to help detect, the vibration of the bowl helps me to detect where there might be entity attachments or weird stuff like that. Because part of my work, as a contractable magical practitioner, is exorcism. So I do a lot of exorcism and spirit removal and stuff like that, or spirit zhuzhing forward. Just you can't be here, but go live a good life. And then recently with this research with La Malinche and La Llorona, I've been developing a new practice where I take offerings to the river, the Rio Grande, which is right by our house, and I sing La Llorona, down by the river, and I sing it loudly as an offering to La Llorona, as a protective spirit. So laying the offering, singing the song, and then asking her to walk with me and protect me through my day. And that's been really, really beautiful. I have never really used a large amount of music in my practice. But I've also been a professional singer, so why haven't I? I don't know. But now I'm starting, and it's been really, really nice. But I like it because I do think that the voice is really important. And the breath is very important in getting enchantments to stick and go and grow and live. And so I've always spoken things out loud. and like tried to get my breath like in the work, like breathing on everything, and like as I'm speaking, like getting the vibration of my voice into whatever I'm doing, to help wake it up. But recently with this new singing thing, I've been feeling a lot more, I don't know, oomphy. My breast is full of oomph. um, so yeah, I guess that would be my answer to that question. That was a stumper because I was kind of like, how do I?
Well, I think you may have just listed like some of my favorite parts of sound magic and all of that. Like you went through them really quickly. So there's the importance of breath and vibration. There is using sound as like a diagnostic device for funky juju or bad spirits, and then there's music or singing as an offering. And those are definitely some of my favorite aspects of using music or sound for magical purposes. So that's cool that you've got all of that going on. And you, on one hand, you say like you didn't really think you had that much, but then also judging from what you just told me, like that's a significant, those are significant parts of your practice, it sounds like. So
I guess they are. Good question, by the way. Very good question.
it's my favorite to hear answered. So I like it. Well, Kamden, I really appreciate you coming on the show and taking this time to talk with me. And I know we've kind of hit our time, so I will end the call. But just one more time, thank you. I am grateful for you. And with that, I will say farewell.
Thanks, Eric.
That was a great interview, and another big M3 thank you to Kamden for taking the time to be with me on the show today. If you haven't already grabbed a copy of The Tameless Path or checked out Kamden's shop, go ahead and do that now. There are links for those in the video description below. Please make sure that you like and subscribe here on YouTube. You can also follow me on Facebook or other social media at Eric Arcadian. Those kinds of interactions are really important for small content creators like me. So every time you like a post, leave a comment, or even when you just watch a video through all the way to the end, that makes a difference. You're telling the algorithm that my content has value. And best of all, it's free for you to do. It costs you nothing. But if you want to go that extra mile and help support me making more content in the future, please check out my Patreon page. Everything I've received there has been 100% reinvested in these endeavors. Things like website, hosting, or software fees. So you can feel good about that. Plus, you'll get access to some cool perks. You can watch these interviews before anyone else, and you can download my music. Thanks for watching, and remember, there's always a way to make music. Until next time.